This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, so yesterday we discussed about the component composition, how we use body, and how we use this Aura component type to embed the markup from the parent component into the child components. So today we're going to understand about the inheritance. Okay, so when you have the parent component and when you have the child component, so we are not going to embed each other. Okay, so what we do in one component, we inherit by using extends and try to make use of the attributes, controller functions, and helper functions from the parent. Okay, so let me create one component and show you how we do that. For that, I'm going to create one of the component with this name or a component. This is the component. Okay, so let's say this component you want to expose into one of the other component, so where it can inherit the attributes and maybe functions in the controller and the helper, and also events. Still we did not discuss about the events. Some of the events what we configured, everything can be inherited into the child component. Okay, so by default this component cannot be inherited. To allow inheriting this component by other component, we have to use one of the attribute called extensible is equal to true. So we need to use this. If you use this component can be inherited from the other component. Okay, so the rule is in order to allow inheriting this component, we have to use one attribute called extensible is equal to true. Okay, so now first I am saving this one, and maybe in this component, so I'm going to define one attribute, and let's say I'm going to define a controller function and see how we can inherit that. Okay, so now here I'm defining one of the attribute Aura attribute, name of the attribute. So let's say parent, so value, something like this. This is the name of the attribute I'm giving, and type I'm giving string. Let's say I'm giving some default value, added in the, so in super component, when we deal with this inheritance, the parent component we call as a super component, where we are inheriting that one we call as a sub component. Just the technical terminology. Okay, super component, this is a attribute I'm defining, and also in the controller JS and the helper JS you can add some functions, and those functions also you can call. Okay, so let me show you how that will work. So in the controller JS, okay, so let's say I'm giving a name called to action, and I'm defining one of the function, right? So here just I'm printing in the console.log do action function in the super component. That's it. That is the message. Okay. So I'll show you how exactly this we can use in the shared component. Okay. So let's deploy this. So since now we have multiple files, it's better to right click on the entire folder and deploy. Okay. So now it is deployed. And now let me create one subcomponent where we are going to inherit this. Okay, and I'll show you. So maybe I'll give the name as dress up fun Aura component. Let's say sub. So that is the name I'm going to give. Okay, this is the name of the component. So now here in this subcomponent, so how we inherit and make use of the attributes and the controller functions and helper functions in the subcomponent, we have to use extends. We have to use extends, right? While inheriting class to class, we use extends. Here, component is like a class. Okay, C colon, the namespace, the default namespace is C, and the parent component name, right? So this is the name of the parent component. Now, so this component is inherited, this component. So when you inherit, so what and all will be inherited? Okay, so maybe, so I'll say it is going to inherits, let's say subcomponent inherits all the attributes from the parent, and also inherits all the controller functions and the helper controller and helper JS functions. So all those things can be inherited. And also, still we did not discuss about a concept called firing events. We can also register event and handle event. So basically, it can also inherit events defined in the parent. All the events registered in the parent. This how we register going forward. We'll get to. So all these are the points. Okay. So just I'm keeping in this component. Maybe if you want to keep in comment, highlight everything and control slash will comment. So these things just so you should know. Now here I'm going to refer v dot in the parent component. This one, right? The attribute I'm referring here, but that attribute is not defined here, right? Because child can inherit the properties of the parent, the attributes. You'll see that value whatever we have in the parent. In the same way, I want to maybe add one button to call the function which is present in the parent control. Okay, so for that again I'm defining one of the button, lightning button, label, call parent function. Let's say it's the name of the button, and on click we are going to call c dot the function name which we defined in the parent controller, right? So like this. Okay, now I'm just deploying. I think we have only one file directly I'm deploying. Now let's see the preview of this one for this component and see whether we are able to access or not. So for that, I think we need to log into our account. and go to developer console. Trying to open the developer console. This is a developer console. So I'm trying to see the preview from here, right? So here our component name is sub component inheritance sub, right? So the sub component I'm including to see the preview. So click on preview. Okay, so nothing is displayed. Let me check that. So now nothing is displayed, right? So at least the button should be displayed. In the sub component, we have a button included. So at least this is supposed to be displayed, right? Let me deploy. Run successfully. Inheritance sub. Same thing we are using. Just to refresh. Okay, so we are not seeing anything in the child, right? So there is one of the point is when we do the inheritance mandatorily, so we have to use v dot board. So otherwise the inheritance won't work. Okay, that's the might be the reason. So now let me deploy that the parent component. I'm adding the v dot body. Okay, so that is when we inherit along with the extensible is equal to true. It's better to give v dot body. Okay, now just to refresh. Now you are seeing, right? So that's the one of the point. So now if you see in the parent, what about the attribute values are there, and whatever the button maybe directly we added here. Okay, so the rule is I think this we have to add. That's one of the point. So now to see whether this is able to call the super component JS or not function. So maybe inspect. Click on console, we clear this and click on this. If you see, it is able to call the parent component function, right? The software component that we are seeing here. Select that. And also, let's say if you want to override the parent component function in the child component, you can override with the same name, define a function so that system give priority for the function which is in the same component. Okay. So in case if you want to modify the logic of this function in the child component, you can define the function with the same name so that it will be pointed to the same component function only. Okay, so that's the one of the thing. Okay, and also in the same way helper JS functions. So whatever the functions available in the helper, those functions also we can reuse in the tail component. Okay, so that is also possible. So in interviews, people ask. So there are two components, right? And in the two components, if you want to reuse the JavaScript functions, so what is the JS file you use? Either controller.js you use or helper.js you use, something like that. Okay. So now how that will work, right? When we deal with this, So let's say we have component 1. So assume that we have component 1, right? And we have component 2. So reusing in the sense, if you define the functions in the component 1 helper.js, people think that only those functions we can call in the child component also and reuse. Okay. Technically, we can also call the controller.js functions in the subcomponent, but that is not recommended by Salesforce. Salesforce is saying in future they might deprecate that. Okay, not recommending to call the controller functions which are in the parent. Okay, so if at all if you want to call the super component functions in the child, keep those functions in the helper. Okay, so they are asking to invoke only the helper functions in the child. Okay, not the controller JS functions. So that is one point. And also, when someone says that the helper function, the helper JS file is reusable across the multiple components, that is not true. So this component will be having its own helper. This component 2 is also having one helper, right? In the component 2, if you inherit the component 1 in the component 2, all the functions in the helper of this component 2 plus the functions which are in the parent helper, everything will be available in the component 2. Okay. So when people say reusing the helper resource, the meaning is, so let's say component 1, right? We can refer this same component multiple times when you refer this component, right? So let's say you are referring this component somewhere 2 times by supplying some different data as input or something like this, right? So within the same component, multiple instances of the same component. So you are including. So when you include this, what will happen? Technically, right? So these two are same components, but for same component, again and again we can refer. So when you refer like this, each instance of the component, right? This is one time included, this one more time included. Each instance of the component when it is referred from bundle, it again reinforce all the bundle values again. Controller.js, the UI file and everything, it will reinitiate and freshly it will create a copy, right? But the helper.js, whatever the helper.js file is there, that helper.js will be not maybe copied multiple times for multiple instances. Only one copy system maintains, and from the same place it will try to access for all the instances of this component. So that's the purpose of the helper.js. That's the advantage. Maybe if you want to see some pictorial image. This I want to show you some images where you can easily understand. Okay, so yeah, now if you see this, okay. So now if you try to this, okay, this image. Yeah, this is a Salesforce official documentation. So if you see, so when you have the So now like this, that when you create the two instances, so what it will do, the first instance and the second instance, those helpers will be maintained as one copy and the system user. Okay, so like that internally, there is a benefit when we refer the same component multiple times. Okay, so such kind of behavior is there. So anyway, so all we need to know when we want to inherit the parent component and the child component, the process is in the parent component. We have to give
Share
as
one question.
yeah.
So here, component referring is nothing but like a is like an object, right? If you create a referring a object in number of times, it means it's creating is its own copy. So if referring the object in means like a bundle is creating for each reference, right? Even for helper also, right?
Helper it create only one instance. Okay, so let's say there is a class, right? Let's maybe understand like this. There is a class, right? In the class, you see the static variable and the non-static variable. Okay. When you create two objects for the same class, the non-static variables will be reinitiated for each object. But if you see the static variable will be commonly available with the class name in both objects, right? So it's like that.
Yes.
So
Okay.
helper will be like reusable. I mean, it won't create the copy again and again. So it maintain only one copy, and from everywhere it will look into that copy and reuse the logic from that. It is like that.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, I mean, the Salesforce is not recommending to widely use this inheritance concept. Okay. So instead of using these inheritance concepts, the component composition, right? So creating multiple components and embed to have all the functionality. So that is what they are more uh, asking to implement. Okay, so this inheritance is like less priority to develop. Okay, that's the suggestion from the Salesforce. Okay, so some use cases, since you know the concept, if you really feel that something we can reuse, we can go with this concept. Okay, so that's about some of the points of the inheritance. In the same way, if you see, we also have interface. Okay, or interface. So now, if you create, it is like a custom interface which we are defining. But there are many standard Salesforce interfaces available. Okay. So, for example, after creating the Lightning component, if you want to use the Lightning component as a tab, or if you want to use the Lightning component as a quick action, or if you want to embed the Lightning component in one of the record page or home page, we have to inherit some of the standard interfaces provided by Salesforce. Okay, we have standard interfaces, so we have the custom interface. If you create the custom interface, what exactly we can keep in the custom interface? We can only define the attributes, right? Let's say some of the attributes you want to define in one place and inherit and reuse those attributes in the component where we work. Okay, so in those situations, we define all the attributes in the custom Aura interface what we created. Again, we don't recreate those attributes in the child component. Directly, we refer in the component what where we inherited this and proceed. That kind of interface when we create the custom one. So mainly for attributes to define in one place and use in the component where we inherited, this will be useful. But mostly we use the standard interfaces For standard interfaces, no need to refer anything. I mean, no need to, from our side, don't define. Already, those are predefined by the system. All we do, we inherit, and those components will allow us to make our components, whatever we developed, to use. For example, as a tab, as a quick action in the home page, all those things. Okay. We have next example for that, where we use our components, what we created. Okay. So for that, all we need to do, we need to inherit a interface. We'll see that. Okay. So that's about these points. Okay. So, but not more. So I mean, best approach to really inherit and use that. Okay, that's the suggestion from Salesforce. So the next point, sometimes if you see for some of the components, there is an attribute called access. Access. So basically, the component, whenever the component or application, if you see, we see one attribute called access for the Aura component or Aura application. We can give either public or global. Public means only within the same package. That means within the same instance. So let's say we can also make these components. After developing these components, we can create as a package, right? When we create as a package, we create a namespace, and within the namespace, this component will be available. Outside the namespace, in some other namespace, if you don't want to allow the component to be used, so that time we use this access as public. And even if you want to allow the component to use even outside the namespace, let's say we make all these components as one package, client install that package. After installing, they also want to refer our component what we developed in their own developed components. If you want to allow that, the access should be global. Okay? That's the purpose of the public and global. And also when you deal with the attribute, you see three types: private, public, and also global. So private means only within the same component. So in the other components, maybe inherited components, other components, if you don't want to allow to use, so that time we use private. Okay. A public means again same meaning within the same package. So even outside the package, if you want to make attribute available, we have to give access as global. This is about that. Okay. Mainly, so this just some examples you see access is equal to global. That time to understand. Okay. So now the one of the next example. We are going to understand about the inheritance of the components. That means already just now this is what we created, right? Okay, so now the next one is this showing. So in general, already we discussed it so far. When you have the component, if you want to display or hide the UI markup at some part of the page, if you want to hide and or show based on some conditions. So far we are using Aura if. Already we used Aura if, right? So now, so I'm going to explain about with this CSS also we can hide and show, right? With the CSS styles, how we can hide and how we can show the component. That now I'm going to explain. Okay. So just let's see how we deal with it. Okay. So maybe before we deal with that, so I think in yesterday's example, whatever we created, I think this is component composition, right? So I want to add few points to that. Okay, I'm opening that component. So this is the component we created, and this we inherited in this component, and we are supplying the markup to this component, and we are seeing the results, right? So now, if you want to clear the body, whatever is referred in that composition child, okay? So I'm opening that. This is the child component. So here v dot body, right? So this is inherited, whatever from parent we supplied. So that will be supplied into this one, right? And we are seeing that. So now, so what I want to do? So I want to remove the content which we supplied from the parent component, okay? So for that, I am adding some logic. Whatever parent is supplied that UI markup, on click on a button, I want to make this as blank. Okay, so let's see for that what we do. Maybe again close it. So I'm just referring this and see the preview. Okay, now you are seeing this, right? So now this content is coming from the parent, right? I'm the content added in the parent component. Now I want to make it as blank. So here I'm adding one button, okay? Aura, sorry, lightning button, label. So I'm giving the label as remove body. That is the label, right? And maybe on click, I'm calling one of the function c dot remove body. In the same way, I want to add some other body, right? So how dynamically through JavaScript we can remove and we can add body into this? Just I'm trying to show. Okay, so this is add body. Okay, so now in the JS file, so opening the controller.js. So here let's say remove body component. Here we are going to remove, and one more function add body. Okay, so now in the remove body, all we do is component dot set. If you want to set some value into attribute, we use set, right? So v, to refer the attribute, we use v, the name of the attribute body, right? So if you want to set with the blank body, if you want to make it as blank, then we use this. Okay, so like empty array we keep, right? If you see this body is which data type? Aura dot component array type, right? It is this type, right? So this is array. I'm making it as empty like this. We can make it as empty. Okay, let's maybe deploy and see. Now I'm deploying this component composition child, right? This one. So deploying. So now when you click on this, you see the content is removed. And just to refresh. So when this should be removed. When I click on remove body, you see that is removed, right? Now I want to add the body. That means I want to add one component into this v dot body. So now through JavaScript, if you want to add the UI markup into the body attribute, so we have to create the component through JavaScript. That means dynamically. Now this is not UI to include. Let's say I want to add one card If it is on UI, I say lightning card title is equal to some value and keep some content, right? But in JavaScript, same thing how we create. If you want to create a card or if you want to create a button or something element, if you want to add, even our custom component also we can add. Okay, so that is the concept is dynamic component creation. Dynamic component creation. How dynamically we create the component. So to dynamically create the component, okay, so what we do, first of all, I'm getting the body, whatever body is there, I'm getting. Okay, so let's say here body is equal to get the existing body, right? So what we do, component dot get, to refer the attribute we say v dot body. I'm getting and storing here. Okay, now we are going to push our whatever we are going to dynamically create into this and add to this body to display on the UI. Okay, so now for that, to dynamically create, we use $a dot create component. $a dot create component. So this is one of the function, the system function we have to use. $a is one of the global value provider. In that there are some system functions are available. Create component is one of the function. So as a first parameter, we have to give the component name. It can be a standard component or custom component. If it is a standard custom component, we say C colon component name. If it is a custom component, let's say I want to add one card, lightning card, okay, one of the standard component. This is the name of the component. And into that component, what are the attributes you want to supply? One of the, it is like a tag, right? It is a component. Component will be having attributes, multiple attributes. To add all those things in the object format, yeah, name and value. What are the attributes you want to supply? From here we have to supply. So let's say here I'm giving title. I'm giving title as, let's say, dynamically created component. Let's say that's the title. If you want to add some other attribute values, comma, again, that attribute name and attribute value. This second parameter, this second place is for adding the attribute. This is the component name. It can be a standard component or custom component. This is to add the attributes to that component. Third one, the callback function. And when this is created, so the result after creating that component, the result will come into this function as a input. Okay, so let's say new card component. Yeah, we are assuming, so whatever system will take care of supplying that into this function once this component creation is completed. So we are giving the name like this. Whatever system creates, that will be into this one. Now finally, that component, I'm going to push into this, right? Push. This is array, right? In array, if you know little basics of the JavaScript, or if you don't know, if there is array, in array, if you want to add one element, we use push, right? This element we have newly added into this. Okay, I'm saying dot push, so that this dynamically created component is adding into this. Finally, I want to assign that into this body, right? Okay, so here instead of making it as empty. Now this time, this along with the newly added component, that body I'm posting here. I'm assigning to this attribute, right? So into this, you will see that. Okay, that's the thing. So the new thing what we are learning here is how dynamically in the JavaScript we can generate the component. Previously, this component before, if you don't call this function, that component is not shown on the UI. When you click on some button or when you call this function, then dynamically it is going to add this component to display on the UI, right? This is one of the way how we dynamically show or hide the component on the UI. Okay, that is to know about that. So now let's save this and see. Deploy. So it is deployed. So now just refresh. Okay. So now I'm just remove, already we know it will remove. Now add, right? Add, you will see one card with the title dynamically created, something like that. Right? If you see here, dynamically created component, this is a card. Okay. So this is how, now maybe we created one, right? We also have $a.create components. You can also create multiple components. All those things are there. Okay, just as soon as you know this concept, you can also work on the other things. Okay, so this is the example which I want to explain here. Okay, now this one just now whatever we discussed is whatever. So we are dealing here. We see here dynamically creating the component. This is covered due to that. Okay, and also RI so far already we use in most of the places in our previous components, right? This will also be used to dynamically show or hide the content. Now with CSS, how we do? Okay, let's create one component and understand about that. Okay, so for that I'm closing all this. Now I'm creating one of the new component, Aura component, and I'm giving the name show or hide. And with the CSS, how we do that, I will show you. Okay, now maybe here. I'll say this text will be shown or hidden dynamically. Okay, so this is what I'm adding. Okay, so now to recognize this one, you know, we use IDs, right? Local ID, RID. We can also give RIDs for the HTML tag. Maybe previously we saw how we use this for the standard components or our custom components to recognize. Okay, this we can also give for the HTML tags. So let's say this is the ID to recognize this I'm giving. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce a button with the name toggle. Toggle means first one time if you click it will hide, one time if you click it will show, right? Hide and show alternatively. So I'm going to create a button, lightning button, label toggle. Okay, and on click. Okay, I'm going to call one function c dot toggle content something. Okay, that is the name of the controller JS function. Okay, now in the JavaScript controller, I'm going to use this name, toggle content. I'm giving the function name like this. Maybe this one I want to rename to component. Okay, so now, so here I'm going to place the logic, hide or show the markup. Okay, so first of all, so to add the CSS and remove the CSS, we have to define the CSS in the style file, right? So I'm opening one of the resource, show or hide CSS. In the CSS, we define the styles. Okay. So here, directly inside the component, if there is a tag, to apply the style for that without any space, right? We have to give the style class name. This is the style class name. So I'll say to hide the element, display none means it will hide. Okay. So dynamically for this div component, so it is like how we are going to add class is equal to display none. That's what we are going to add. One more time, if we click, I am going to remove. Right. So that's what we do. So from our side, without writing think and writing the toggling logic. So Salesforce. So here, as part of this global functions, $a, we have util. Okay. So in that util, it's like internally like a JS. Okay. So we have a function toggle. Toggle class. Okay. This is a function available. Okay. So if you see this toggle class, so we have to, as a first parameter, we have to give the element, which element you want to toggle that element. And the second one, what is the class you want to add or remove. And this one we are going to use. Now, if you see, right, if you see the example, right, it is also generating the example, right? Maybe if you want to copy that, that also you can do. So this is the example. Exactly, we are going to do this. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, so find, and in our case it is div id. This is the element. This element. So here, maybe the variable name is copied like this. Into that, the element is added. This is the element for which we want to apply the toggle. So what is the class we want to add? Maybe the class name also I gave as toggle, right? So it will be referred to that class. Now it will add it, and again one more time if you click, it will remove. Like that it will do. So this concept will be useful for you to dynamically hide or show the elements on the UI with the CSS. Okay. So now let's deploy and see how it works. Okay. So for this, go to this, right click on the folder and deploy.
Shenu, can you please explain the last line on the controller file?
So last line. Yeah.
I mean,
so,
file.
Yeah. So this is a global location where you see some of the standard functions. Okay. $a.util toggle class is one of the system function. Okay. How this function will work? In the first parameter, we have to supply the element for which element you want to add the class or remove the class, right? So here we are identifying, sorry. So here in our case, it is CMP, right? We have renamed it to CMP. So it should be CMP.find, so that it will find our div. This entire div element is assigned to this variable. So this element as a first parameter we are giving, and this is the class which you want to add or remove. Where is this class defined? If you see here, we have CSS file. Here I have defined the class.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. So toggle is the name of the class that we defined in CSS file.
Yeah. So internally, what will happen when we click on that? So one time, it will be adding a class like this. Again, if you click one more time, it will remove. Again, if you click, it will add. Like that, it will do.
Okay.
Okay.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Now let's see how it is working. So I think for that, go here. Show or hide. That's the component name. Just refreshing. Okay. Now this is the text we have. One time, if I click, it will hide. Again, if I click, it will add. So that's the concept, toggling, right? Add and remove. Okay, so that's about this example. So the other two things, right, to maybe conditionally rendering component. Already we used this one in previous example. Just before to this, we dynamically created. Okay, so these are options we have to control visibility dynamically on the UI. Okay, so that's it. That's about that topic. Now the next topic. So where exactly we use the components? So far we are creating the component and adding into our application and seeing the preview, right? So where exactly we use? Where exactly we refer? Do you want to use the component as a tab, or want to use on a home page, or you want to use on the one of the record page, or you want to use the component in a record page, but you want to restrict it to a particular object? Okay, so all those kind of things we are going to understand as part of this example. Okay, so now let me create this, and slowly I'll explain about all those concepts. Okay, so copy, and I think I recommend you to follow this order and look into the component logic and the practice. That way, all topics will be covered and will be having good understanding. Okay, so now here let me create this component. Press F1 or a component. In this component, I'll show you how we can use it as a tab, how we can make use of this as a quick action. Okay, so those kind of things. So I'm going to show you with this. Okay, so now, so this is the one. First of all, I want to show you. So this component, how we can show in one of the home page or record page. Or so if you want to control visibility to show on a particular page, either on home page or record page. So if you see in our previous topic, we discussed about interface. To inherit the interfaces, we use implements, right? There are many system interfaces are available. So let's say in case you want to make this component available on, let's say, on one of the record home page. Okay, so we have to inherit one of the interface called flexi page colon available for record home. There is an interface available for record home. So really remembering is very difficult, right? So that's why what you can do, you can go to the component library. You need to bookmark this, right? Component library. So here you see all the standard interfaces available. So one of the interface, so view as list, flexi page available for. So actually, our home page or the record page, all those are technically we call as flexi page. When you do the deployment for the Lightning home page or Lightning record page, those pages are available in the flexi page format. Okay, that's why flexi page, so available for record home, right? So now this is what I'm trying to so type here and make it available, right? But maybe first time it is very really difficult to remember. You can look into this and understand so how exactly this is useful. We'll also see some example how it will be used and see. Okay, so basically this it makes this component available on the record page if you create this. Okay, if you don't create, it won't show. Okay, I think since we don't have time, tomorrow we'll see more about this. Okay, and also let's say when you are adding this component in the record page, you want to configure some of the properties which are defined in the component. How we can make administrator available, administrator make the some of the attributes available. So those things we discuss tomorrow since we don't have time today. Okay, so that's the tomorrow what we deal mostly in different places, how we use and all those things we discuss. Okay, so before ending today, so any questions, anyone? So maybe let me push this into I think this, right? This is I can already have connected to this batch 96, that one. In the repository, I think already now whatever I created also we'll see. Okay, and also I think if you don't know how to maybe clone it and keep in your VS Code, so what you can do, maybe based on the operating system, the process will be different. Okay, I'm using Mac, and the first time the process of integrating this to GitHub, the process is different, and Windows is also different. Okay, so if you read some document or maybe if you research something and if you are able to connect, it is fine. Otherwise, one of the easiest way is, so let's say this is a project. So I'm saying, I think you are struggling to open this project in the VS Code. Okay, so what you can do, you can download as a zip, right? You can download this entire thing as a zip, right? So now we have in our system, extract that, right? So once you extract, it will be like this. All you need to do in the VS Code, file, open, and give the location of that, right? In downloads, it is there. So this one. If I give, all this project will be loaded into your VS Code. So now, what you do, everything if you want to deploy into your organization, let's say you want to make this entire copy into your developer edition. For that project, authorize that project, right? And give your developer edition username and password, and finally open package.xml and deploy, so that all these will be pushed into your organization. So that's the easiest process for you to copy everything what I am doing. Okay. Any questions on this? Anyone is struggling to access this? Okay, we'll continue tomorrow. Okay, this notes is also there in the static resources in this GitHub. If you open static resources, the notes also is there, whatever on day to day I'm typing, that notes you can see here. Right? Today I think these things. So today whatever I typed is there. I think today I have typed this. Yeah, I'm not seeing. I think this is not. So what happened? I think I did not commit. Without committing, if I push, it is not going to work. Now I think it will be pushed, and now if you see, now it is there. Okay, now you see the latest thing. Okay, so we'll continue tomorrow. Okay, thank you.